What if they threw a peace party in the Middle East and nobody came, or no journalists anyway? I'm Scott Ott, and this episode of Bill Whittle Now is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And Bill, that's the story coming from our friend Helen Raleigh at TheFederalist.com. And by friend, I mean somebody I don't know who I read at TheFederalist.com. She's saying basically that the major American corporate-owned media have largely ignored this week's announcement of a deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates that was brokered by President Trump and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. And we talked about this on a recent episode, and I expected that this would be all over the news. So I'm doing an unusual follow-up in close proximity to the initial episode, simply because I think Helen has a point here. There has been very little coverage, and I exhaustively read all the major news sources that you'd be familiar with. And yet there's not a big focus on what is called, by the way, the Abraham Accord. What do you make of this?
I actually spend a lot of energy on this. I really do. I spend a lot of energy doing everything I can to prevent myself from going where I am constantly drawn. But with that said, I hate these people. I hate them.
Which people? I mentioned a lot of people there.
The press. I hate them with every single atom of my body. I just hate them. They are responsible for all of this. There would be no problems in this country, no federal debt. Obama wouldn't have been elected, nothing. Hillary Clinton would be in jail if there was anything like a free press. And for these people to continually tell me that they are on some moral plane above me, and intellectual too, meaning they're going to tell me when it's safe for me to go outside, and they're going to tell me when I can try to recover the restaurant that got closed because of their hysteria. They're going to cover stories that don't exist. They're going to hype stories that have essentially zero interest, like the Russia collusion thing. And any good news that comes from Orange Man will simply be suppressed, won't even be covered. It'll be just chucked down the memory hole. These people are not only evil, they are unspeakably arrogant and stupid. And I try to keep myself out of this, but I can't do it. Every single time a story like this comes along, I just get a little bit closer to being able to say there is no explanation possible other than the fact that these people are pure evil, driven by arrogance and ignorance and greed and mostly out of narcissism, this unbearable narcissism that these news media people have that make them think that they are better arbiters of what the American people should know than the American people themselves. We did an article, a show not terribly long ago on a psychological study of people who basically become journalists. They have lower IQs than the average population. They have poorer emotional control than the average population. They are more inclined to fantasy than the average population. And they have such power in this country, it makes me sick. I've had enough of them. I am utterly, 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 utterly finished with them. And if anybody ever says to me that they are a professional journalist, I will say to them, why don't you just say something less disgusting, like that you're a towel boy in a Turkish whorehouse or something that's not quite so low as a modern journalist in America today.
You know, there are a couple of other stories that Helen Raleigh brings to our attention at TheFederalist.com that again, maybe it's my faulty memory, maybe it's because I don't read the right places, but I don't remember hearing a whole lot about these. And she says this, early signs of increasingly warm relations between Israel and the UAE were seen in 2019 when the UAE launched its Year of Tolerance. As part of that initiative, that nation invited Pope Francis to speak. It hosted interfaith meetings with religious leaders worldwide, announced the construction of an interfaith center in Abu Dhabi to house a Jewish synagogue, a Christian church, and a Muslim mosque or Islamic mosque. It invited Israel to attend the 2020 World Expo in Dubai. And it goes on to several other things that just didn't come up, at least on my radar. Bill, these are the things that the left has said that it wished for from time immemorial. In any case, they've wanted it for a long time. And are they really that craven and provincial and political as to ignore something that's been a dream that even Joe Biden said was an historic accomplishment just because they don't want to see Donald Trump reelected?
I praised Joe Biden for praising this agreement a couple of episodes ago, and then I found out afterwards that he's saying it's all a result of the Obama administration finally come true. This is the same argument they used on the economy and so on and so forth. And listen. That list of things that happened in 2019 in the year of tolerance, any one of the several that you listed, any one of them had happened by accident under Barack Obama. It would have been the cover of every newspaper article, of every news magazine. We would have heard endless stories about it. It would have been 15 days on the front page of the New York Times and so on. These people are not just partisan. They're not just biased. They are operatives. I don't care whether they're working for themselves. They are political agitators and propaganda specialists. And for them to, and the worst of it is, for them to claim that they love peace, it's just a lie. They don't love peace unless it's peace that's been brokered by their guy. They don't love women unless it's an act that favors women that's brokered by a Democrat. If it's brokered by a Republican, not only do they not care, but they put it down. And furthermore, if a Democrat does something egregious, like, I don't know, let's say the former president of the United States, I'm just taking a hypothetical here, just a former president of the United States who happened to be a Democrat, gets on board the Lolita special, flies down to an island where underage girls are statutory raped, and he does it 26 times. And it's like, maybe he went to the island. Bill Maher said it's possible he could have gone to the island. He was on Epstein's plane 4 times that he admitted. He was on Epstein's plane 26 times, according to the flight logs. And for them, it's like, that's it. And we saw the same thing with Tara Reid. Believe all women. You must believe all women. All women have to be believed, believe the survivors, unless they happen to be pointing towards Democrats, in which case, destroy them. It is beyond my ability to communicate how filled with disgust, hatred, and contempt I am for these miserable, low-life, narcissistic bastards. And I swear to God, I really do. They are going to have a reckoning coming to them. It is going to be the salvation or the destruction of this country, on whether or not the mainstream media, as we understand it now, is destroyed, yes or no. And it is happening in front of their eyes, which is why they're getting more toxic, by the way. It's not like this has to happen. It's happening every single day. And I am beyond enraged about this. I am absolutely apoplectic when it's bad enough when they invent stories and they exaggerate stories, but when you have a story of national significance, worldwide significance, that is brokered by somebody they don't like, and so it didn't happen. It didn't exist. You may remember this with the economy before COVID-19. You may remember the economy was booming. Blacks had never been doing better in this country. Women either. Hispanics either. Not even worth the story. We come off of 8 years of the recovery summer that never came, and every one of those is lauding this guy. This is the problem. There are no other problems. If there was an accurate, aggressive news force in this country, a free press that was going after Republicans and Democrats equally hard, then we would be having none of these problems. But because of this, we are now in a life and death struggle, not only for the Republic, for God's sake, that's trivial. The American Republic is trivial compared to what's really at stake. And what's at stake is the idea of external truth, and that is under attack by these people who claim to be they claim to be journalists and newsmen, and they wonder. They're utterly mystified. Well, people start booing them when they show up at locations. They're utterly astonished that people might call what they're doing fake news. How could you possibly say that? We work for CNN. We work for the New York Times. You're the lowest bunch of people in the country. You don't deserve to live here. And I really genuinely wish you would go and live in one of these hellholes that you constantly tell us are so much better than this awful, awful country that you drive around in limousines, and whose skyscrapers you live in, and whose $200 dinners you partake of every single evening. You can all go straight to hell as far as I'm concerned, you miserable low-life swine.
Well, on the advice of your physician, I'd like to turn the focus of this episode a moment here because Helen Raleigh actually kind of buries the lead in my mind in this story. And so therefore I buried it in this episode. And she says this: contrary to assertions that the Trump administration has no coherent strategic plan in the Middle East. And then she goes on to quote a guy named Ilan Berman, Senior Vice President for American Foreign Policy Council, saying that the Trump administration has a clear and ambitious plan for the region comprised of three distinct yet closely connected components. Obviously, this is really detailed, but I'll just broad brush them quickly for you, Bill. And I'll admit that a lot of Republicans, even supporters of President Trump, have the sense that he just is shooting from the hip. But according to Berman, the Trump administration's strategy's three focuses are, number one, on Iran and essentially pushing back against Iran's attempts at regional hegemony and influence. Number two, forming a Middle East alliance, a strategic alliance that some people call Arab NATO, to confront and push back against extremism and terrorism. And number three, an Israeli-Palestinian deal. And even Thomas Friedman at the New York Times is saying that maybe the Palestinians need to return to the table at this point in the wake of the Abraham Accord, because a peace deal is Iran's worst nightmare. Bill, this may shock some people. It looks like the Trump administration may have a coherent Middle East foreign policy.
Yeah, and they may have a coherent economic policy, and they may have had a coherent COVID-19 policy, and they may have had a coherent policy on just about everything, but you'll never know. And not only, I take that back. Of course you will know. You will know that the entire thing is utter chaos, completely run by a lunatic the whole time. It is utterly chaotic. It is utterly random. It is destroying America's standing in the world, and the tyrant continues to rule the republic. And I'm going to shout it from the rooftops on my multi-million-dollar platform 5 times a day to let people know that the tyrant who has descended on America and taken all of our freedoms, I'm going to talk about this guy in front of millions of people 5 times a day. And the irony of this is utterly lost on these morons. This idea, I'd never heard it put this way before, but it is exactly what I suspect Donald Trump has been doing, and it is absolutely the only solution to this Middle East quagmire that has plagued us as a species for 2,000 years now, pretty much on or off. No, who am I kidding? 4,000 years. This idea of forming an alliance, not so much with Israel, but realizing that it is in the interest of moderate states like the UAE and a number of others who now have the tallest skyscrapers in the world, these glistening cities, these oasis of capitalism in the desert that they've built out of nothing. It suddenly occurred to somebody in the American administration, in the American political body, I should say, that maybe these people have more in common with the United States than do the mullahs, whose great invention of the last 20 years was a buzzer that let you know when your head was coming off of the mat. This is a mystery to the State Department. It's a mystery to the professional diplomats. You're damn right it is a mystery to them, because they are so deep inside this well, and they are so sure of themselves and their diplomatic niceties and all the rest of it, and their blue banners. And of course it's a good idea. To quote Monty Python, of course it's a good idea to form a NATO of Arab nations and to scale down our commitment to NATO in the face of a European economy that is doing just fine and more than capable of being able to defend themselves in terms of their finances, and whose dependence on the American taxpayer to pay for their defense over the last 40 years has allowed them all of these social benefits and so on that they mock us for not having, because we not only have to pay for our defense, but their defense as well. This is why I will tolerate anything from this Donald Trump. I'll tolerate essentially anything from him. And they don't understand this either. They're mystified. They haven't got the slightest idea why people could still support such a guy who's so crass and so vulgar and all of those things. Well, maybe he is. I don't care. He produced the best economy this country, who am I kidding? He's produced the best economy this world has ever seen before the Chinese Communist Party decided to lie about what happened in their viral lab in Wuhan. He did more for minorities in 3 years than the Democrats have done in 3 well, almost in 2 centuries, honestly, since there's been a Democratic Party. And on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And we continue to live, as I've thought many times, if you're a science fiction fan like I am, one of these science fiction tropes, you've seen it 1,000 times, is that somebody goes back in time and they alters the timeline, and now I've been transported to this dystopia where suddenly everything has gone wrong. And I look around and I say, that's the line we're in. We're in the dystopia timeline where something happened, where we could have had a free press. We could have had Booker T. Washington's advice instead of W.E.B. Du Bois's advice. We could be living in essentially a garden compared to the sewer that we find ourselves in because the left has been allowed to get away with these lies, these misrepresentations, these outright inventions, and wrap it in a cloak of supposed pretend virtue that is designed to and is very effective at penetrating the skepticism of good people and appealing directly to their sense of decency. And therefore, since people aren't racists, if you accuse them of being a racist, they'll shut up because the idea is mortifying to them. That doesn't happen when you call a member of the Klan a racist or Aryan Nation a racist or the Nazi Party a racist. They don't suddenly shut up. They start talking louder. All of this has been going on for my adult life at the very least. And by the way, it's going to come to an end. And it's going to come to an end with their failure because the truth is out there and there's nothing that they can do about it. Nothing. There's nothing that they can do about it. They can win short-term gains. They can destroy the country. But the truth is the truth, and the truth is out there. And if you are an ally of the truth, you have allied yourself with the most powerful force on this physical earth. And sooner or later, you will succeed over these purveyors of not just a mission and invention. They are the purveyors of anti-truth. What they sell is anti-truth. They sell the antithesis to truth. If you combine what they sell with truth, you get a gigantic explosion. And it won't continue, and it can't. They're losing badly, and they know it. And that's why they're so desperate. So by all means, continue with this. I suspect that if this election comes and goes and they don't manage to cheat their way out of it and Donald Trump wins by a large margin, I suspect that there's not going to be any press coverage of it at all. I think it's not even going to be mentioned in the New York Times on the first Wednesday in November that Donald Trump won the election last night. It'll just be like it never happened. Just like the peace deal and the economy and everything else.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're grateful to the people who watch this, but more importantly to the people who make it possible for you to watch this, the members at BillWhittle.com. If you've not yet joined that band of committed conservatives and liberty lovers, go to BillWhittle.com and click the big green Become a Member button. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.